Morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We've got another webinar from one of our members, Net Defence, who have delivered a number of webinars on various cybersecurity information over the past half a year or so. And really, this session is kind of stemmed a lot from off the back of what's happened with Jaguar Land Rover and obviously how cyber is a big threat to our supply chains. Um, so we're delighted that Deborah Cairns has agreed to deliver another session for us. It is recorded, so we can share with you the recording afterwards if you'd like to share with any members of your team. And I'll just hand over to you now, Deborah. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Oh, there's my lights going off. That's part of our carbon footprint. If I don't move around enough, the lights go off. So if I go in the dark, just in case. Thanks for joining this morning. As Laura said, we're just going to be touching again on supply chain risks. I think our previous sessions were recorded as well, so you'll be able to pull those. And I will get a copy of the slides from today over to NEAA as well to be able to distribute with the recording. Today, we're just going to talk a bit about supply chain risk. The JLR attack itself and what we know and what has been happening, and then some practical tips on strengthening your cyber security. If you do have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. Laura, if you could keep an eye on that for me. I have said it, so there should be enough time if people do have questions at the end as well. But if they're jumping in and on a particular slide, then just shout out and we'll deal with them as we go through as well. I do love a question. So what is supply chain risk? It is about a potential disruption. In real summary, it's something that can go wrong in the process of you getting a product or service from one supplier to a customer. And really looking at what can happen in amongst that. There are lots of different types of supply chain risks. So today, as Laura said, we are going to be looking at cyber security. There are lots of other risks in there. So it's supplier risks, operational, logistics, demand, environmental, geopolitical, and cybersecurity. When you do look at those, though, quite a number of those ones that sit above cybersecurity do have a cybersecurity element to them as well. So why does it matter? Well, supply chain risk can lead to increased costs, stock outages or shortages, so halting your production or impacting your production, missing deadlines, reputational damage, and also reducing customer satisfaction. All things which are super important to any sector, but I think that kind of interruption to production itself can be incredibly damaging when you're looking at manufacturing, in particular automotive. There are a few different types of risk. So when we look at there are three main types that we look at. So inherent risk, this, no matter what you do, this will always exist. But the whole point of looking at anything that you would then classify as inherent is that you are aware of it. So one of the most common ones is there is only one supplier of a product or service, for example, in which case, no matter what action you might take, you still have to live with that inherent risk. Now, you've got introduced risk. As the name suggests, it's something that is being brought into your business through your supply chain, and that can be human error, it can be negligent, or it can be malicious action. It's worth noting that these threats can come both internally, so within your employees, for example, or it can be an external source, in which case that is really when you start to look at cyber criminals. And then the final one is exploited risk. That is where the cyber criminals are going to use a weakness in your infrastructure, in your systems, and in your data to launch their attack, compromising the confidentiality, the integrity or the availability of your critical systems and data. And that's where we see an open door or window left in your technology, for example, or it can be coming through on email, which is the most common, is a phishing email. And then it's a human in your business that's engaging with that phishing email that allows that cyber criminal to exploit that risk. And it's worth stating, on the human side, we do great stuff with our technology. And I think it's very rare to find an organization that hasn't strengthened how they're using technology to protect their data and their systems. What we still see significantly is a lack of investment in the humans in your business. I often refer to them as the human firewall. They're bouncing back, between them hundreds and thousands of emails, almost on a daily basis. And that is the most common vector for attack when criminals are looking to exploit a weakness. So really investing in your humans can make a huge, huge difference. We look at supply chain, not all suppliers are created the same. There are layers of suppliers and we tend to see tiering used. I think what is worth absolutely noting is you look at your tier one, so that is someone that you're dealing with directly. But what you might not see behind them is tier two is providing to tier one, three to two, and so on and so forth. So that supply chain matrix can get huge and really complex very, very quickly. And if you are in amongst that range of suppliers, or you're the end receiver of the ultimate product or service, you don't always see the layers that sit behind, which make it really difficult to understand the breadth and depth of risk. It's also fair to say that not all suppliers have the same level of risk as well. You want to be focusing on those that have got access to your systems, for example, access to data, and really focusing on those and those that you can't live without. What is worth noting, and we often miss it, is you've got what we would call a vertical. So that is ultimately being Nissan being able to put a car out to sale. What you also have is your horizontal supply chain. So there are organizations like mine where they're providing key services that don't directly contribute to the service or product that's going to the end goal, but without those supports. So it can be law, it can be accountancy, it can be IT, it can be cyber services. They sit across your horizontal, but can equally just be as critical as someone that you are receiving a raw material from, for example, to meet the demand of your next where you sit in that supply chain. When we look at the top 5 risks originating from supply chain, it is third-party vendor and system breaches. So some of your suppliers will have access to your networks, your data, and your systems. And if that vendor is compromised themselves, the attacker can use that access to jump and leap into your organization. Malware and compromised software updates. So this is where a cyber attacker has inserted some malicious code into some software that you might be using or some firmware. Then you go to do that update, and hidden inside that update, I'm not keen on the Trojanized, but Trojan is where they hide the virus inside something else. So that can be ransomware, or it can be another type of virus that's going to cause damage to your information and system. But unbeknownst to you, when you do the update, and I'm always banging the drum about doing timely updates, it can be hidden inside that. So you're going to introduce that threat without even knowing that you're doing so as well. Weak security practices, particularly at lower tier suppliers. Smaller and more distant suppliers may not be implementing as strong cybersecurity controls as you may be, because supply chains have many, many tiers. That one single link anywhere in amongst that can expose your entire business and your ability to operate without you even knowing that that supplier exists in your supply chain. Data leakage across interconnected systems. As manufacturing has come more online in recent years, we are now asking systems to talk to systems, and that can lead to misconfiguration or insecure file sharing between those systems, which ultimately can lead to, accidental or exploited access to be able to get in there and take data or take control of your systems. And then the final one is ransomware. And it's true to say that ransomware is on the increase. I think there's been about a 50% growth in the UK, or just short of 20,000 organisations that we are aware of. Currently, there is no legislation about reporting. It is changing with the new cyber resilience bill and lots of other things that are coming along. But right now, you don't have to legally actually disclose if you have had a ransomware attack. The ICO will ask that you report within 72 hours, but it is self-reporting. So at the moment, the stats are about 20,000 organizations have been hit in the last 12 months. So that continues to be the most common type of attack that we're facing here in the UK, and not changing, to be honest. It has been that way for quite some time. So let's have a little look at JLR, which is, unless you have been living in a cave since the end of August, you will understand that something significant happened with them. So on the 31st of August, JLR themselves detected a major IT system issue. They made the decision to bring down all of their systems and take them offline. They employ directly around 33,000 employees just in the UK, and their supply chain is somewhere around 120,000. To be honest, every time I go to get the latest, greatest stats, the numbers are growing all of the time. UK production was halted in their 3 manufacturing sites, and their retail operations were also significantly impacted. In early September, JLR confirmed that they would continue to pause production until around October. As of today, the type of attack has not been disclosed, so we don't know if it was a ransomware, a data theft. They've not confirmed anything from that side. Although they have confirmed some data has been compromised, they've not given any indication to the volume or type of data that has been compromised, nor have they confirmed the attacker's identity. The alleged attackers themselves have taken the glory, which is often the case when it comes to ransomware. If it is who they say it is, they are connected with the M&S, the Harrods, and the Co-op that we saw earlier in the year. And they are made up of, or last check, they were made up of teenagers and young adults based in the UK and in the US, and a small splattering across the rest of Europe. So maybe not the type of hacker that we are used to seeing. It does appear that 2 or 3 of them may have merged together to make a super group, and they are the ones that are currently claiming responsibility. As said, that is, an organization that is putting it out there. Nothing has been corroborated and nothing has been confirmed by JLR themselves. They are stating currently that they are at or very close to approaching capacity, so bringing their full productions back online. The quarter ending in September was 485 million losses. Previous was 385 million profit in the previous quarter. Inside those losses, there was 196 million of exceptional costs, and they're tied directly to the cyber attack. There's 2 schools of kind of thought being reported. One is they did not have cyber insurance. The other is that they did have cyber insurance, but it was not enough coverage to deal with the magnitude of the attack that they faced. Those exceptional costs will be things like forensic analysis, additional overtime, maybe additional staff being brought in to recover their systems while the other team is looking at actually what happened and trying to secure evidence in the hope that some kind of prosecution may happen in the future. They have taken a 1.5 billion loan from the government, the first of its kind, specifically just to support supply chain of JLR. That 1.5 billion is not for them to recover. It's not to cover their losses. It is literally to keep the lights on in their supply chain. Core parts of their IT systems have been restored. They've obviously prioritized the ones that are the most important, which is their production systems and their ability to take deliveries and pay their suppliers and pay others. Investigations continue to be ongoing. As I said, every time I look at this and go back and check some reputable press and what is being putting out, those numbers are increasing. So I don't believe that 196 million is the final number, given that this was a quarter ended in September. At that point, the attack had only been 30 days old, there or thereabouts at that point in time. So looking at the wider impact, all orders stopped abruptly, so they were not able to take any deliveries and no new orders were being accepted. Cash flow froze. Their systems meant they were not able to pay their suppliers. And what I understand is that they pay just in time, which means they pay on receipt of delivery. So all of those deliveries that had been received in the days before they turned off their systems, none of those suppliers were being paid, and they had no option to be able to pay anything at that point in time. Many of their suppliers have reported layoffs and furlough. Many have had to lay their staff off permanently. Some have been in a position to be able to furlough them, and some have moved their employees to 0-hour contracts in the period when they were not providing services or products into JLR. The wider the supply, sorry, put my teeth in. The wider supply chain impact is that many tier one suppliers rely on each other's. So the ripple effect is and is continuing to be significant and fast. So we're thinking back to what I mentioned just a few slides before. They're looking at their tier one, but behind tier one could be as many as 12 or maybe 13 tiers hiding behind. And given that their supply chain is so wide and so vast, many of those customers, many of those suppliers, sorry, sitting in that JLR may have been their only customer. So at that point, have all orders frozen and no timing given on when this might recommence. You can then start to see where the financial stress and insolvency risk is then appearing from many firms declaring out they've found themselves in desperate situations. JLR have done some help to try and help their supply chain. They have launched their supplier financing scheme where certain suppliers are being paid cash upfront rather than the typical invoicing to help with liquidity and get those factories restarted. So hopefully bringing back those employees that have been furloughed or were on 0-hour contracts, or even maybe some of those that were temporarily paid off during that period. They obviously took the 1.5 billion loan facility from the UK government. Said the absolute first of its kind. I've never seen the government step in, which tells you just how significant this is to the UK economy. It is being reported that the cost to the wider economy is sitting about 1.9 billion just now. I don't believe that's the final number either, to be honest. JLR has restarted certain parts of its IT and payment system so that pending invoices or invoices that were stuck in that period of time have been released and paid, so that they can help try and relieve some of the supplier pressure. Scale of the impact. So as I said, the estimated number to the UK economy is 1.9 million. So definitely not to be underestimated at this point. 1.9 billion, sorry, I wish it was million. There has been an independent assessment done by the CMC. They're estimating about 5,000 businesses, not just suppliers, but also those service providers, that horizontal that I was mentioning earlier. So you've got logistic firms and other supplies such as IT, legal, accountancy. So that impact is around 5,000 is what's being reported. There's also, can't deny there's got to have been some significant regional impact. Just as the NEAA looks after a community that exists and operates within the Northeast, this is all within the West Midlands area, and JLR have centred where they can. A lot of the supplying parts comes from their local communities, which is great when you look at it from growing and protecting the area in which you live and work. But that will have had a significant impact in the West Midlands with people's jobs and potentially permanent impact to that. So why does it matter? It really illustrates how one large scale attack can cascade into thousands of smaller firms, really showing how supply chain is independent, and it creates real systemic risk in how we operate and how we manage our supply chain. It really highlights the vulnerability of just-in-time manufacturing. When the order flow stops, then the entire chain freezes, and there's very little buffer in there at all from a financial point of view. For it to suddenly stop, you can't even begin to imagine what some of these smaller firms were going through at that time and continue to try and live through. It really underpins the need for resilience planning. at a supplier level, not just at these big manufacturer level, looking at financial resilience, diversification, and being prepared for cyber risk. It's one thing when you're hearing from organizations like ours, plan. It's not if, it's when. But then thinking beyond that and the impact to you and your ability to operate, but someone else being hit in the supply chain, it being just as catastrophic as if you were hit yourself. It also is raising a lot of questions on a policy level and a government level as to whether the government is ready to be able to step in. It's all looking at also supply chain insurance regimes, making sure these are strengthened as much as possible, and really focused on the small suppliers, which don't have the ability to withstand these types of events for any period of time. One lost customer can be catastrophic to a small business, where even more so if that one customer is all that you provide. And then you find that they have to cease all activity with you, pretty catastrophic in your ability to operate, pay your employees, just keep the lights on. And while JLR have done a great job in bringing production back online, and I will say that they've done it in a really quick way. To only be out for 4 weeks for something as large scale as this is pretty phenomenal. Unfortunately, to get it back up to full scale, they've spent maybe another 4, maybe 5 weeks. They're saying they're there now. We're a few months down the line. You as an organization, could you withstand not being paid for that period of time by your biggest customer, maybe your only customer? So it is definitely opening a lot of questions across the whole of the UK. So looking at some practical tips on what you can do today to make sure that you are as prepared as possible, both in your own cybersecurity resilience, but also looking at across your supply chain and know where you sit in that supply chain. So it's looking and assessing and securing supplier cyber posture, making sure you are looking at your key suppliers before you bring them on, before you sign them up, and making sure that they are taking their cybersecurity as seriously as you're taking your own, and making sure there are clauses within the contracts that they have to meet a minimum security standards and security requirements. Implementing strong access controls. One thing I can 100% guarantee is that they did not land in JLR's system on the 31st of August. It is now widely reported that when cyber criminals do gain access, they can sit in there for weeks, months, maybe even longer. If you go back to Arnold Clark, they still don't know how long their attackers were inside their system. They are not landing on day one and pressing a button, and if it is ransomware, pressing it and encrypting your data. They are hanging around in your systems till they get what they're looking for. So what they're going to be doing is when they get in there, they are looking for the users that have the biggest access. And then maybe not the parts of your business that you would immediately start thinking about. I think the default is they want someone in IT, and don't get me wrong, they do, because IT do have the widest privileges, but there are lots of other pockets within your business that are equally as valuable to cyber criminals. It can be your HR organization, they have access to all of your employee data, and it can be your financial organization, because that is going to tell them how much money you have in the bank and how much you are likely to pay should you be hit with the ransom. And one thing, I was at a conference just a few weeks ago, and I'd not really thought about it either. So they're telling us to not put if we do have cyber insurance, to not have your certificate anywhere in your digital footprint and not make that publicly known. Because if it's telling on that document how much coverage you have, you can guarantee that's the ransom the cyber criminals are going to be looking for you to pay, knowing that you have insurance. Really looking at your enhancing your supply chain visibility, not just for cyber risk, to be fair. There are lots of other things that can go wrong with a supplier, but it's really looking at those that have the most access to your data and system, making sure you're looking at those that you cannot manage without. maybe looking to see if there's a second, a backup supply that you can use, distribute that risk over two rather than one. Then when we look at it from a cyber risk point of view, you want to start looking to monitor for unusual activity. There are some great technology that is out there now, and they've done a great job in bringing down the costs for that. So it really is becoming available to the SME world. If we think about, it's often called a SOC, which is it's basically a center that continues to monitor. So it continues to work while you're in bed and asleep at night, and it sits on your system 24/7, 365. A few years ago, that was not attainable or available to your average SME. What I can tell you now is that there are some great, great options out there, and you're looking at pennies a day rather than hundreds and thousands of pounds a month. And that really starts to help you to protect all of the time, not just when you and your staff are in your business. Can't stress this enough. Develop an incident response and a recovery plan, often called business continuity, disaster recovery. It has lots of names, but it is deciding what you're going to do when this happens to your organization. So you to lose your data, lose your building, lose your people. So it goes beyond just cyber. But if you think about a fire in your building, so you will have fire alarm systems, you'll have smoke detectors, you'll have all of those great things. Pretty sure you don't wait for the fire to test that you can get everybody out of the building. You'll be doing intermittent testing. The same needs to be true with your cybersecurity and making sure that you are testing what you will do without. So whether that could be a tabletop exercise, taking it as far as putting your decision makers in the room and then giving them a scenario and them testing it, or it's just making sure that you with your IT provider, your IT department, you've identified which systems are the most critical, because when something bad happens, everybody will tell you in the organization their data, their system, their access becomes the most critical. And not everyone's critical at the same time in a month. If you were to think of payroll, for example, they'll be critical about 5 days before your payroll runs. You never want to be in a scenario for not paying, but for the rest of the month, they don't sit in that critical area within your business. Look at communication protocols, have them ready to go. How would you unplug if you need to unplug? And how would you recover? Your backup is one of the most powerful tools that you have available when it comes to any type of data loss, whether that be through a fire, through a theft, flood, or through a cyber attack. But if you have not got the right protocols in place and you're not backing your data up often enough, for example, or you haven't tested whether you can recover from your backup. I don't know the age of people who are on the call today, but I still remember the time when you got a new iPhone and you used your backup to build your new iPhone. How many times did you get your backup is corrupt? You're not able to recover from this backup. Same is true of your IT system. So make sure you're taking the time and making sure you're backing up often enough. You can recover from your backup, and your backup is air gap, so it's not connected to your network at all. Because while those cyber criminals are inside your systems, I'm damn sure they're also looking for your backup. If they are going to hit you with a ransomware attack, if they can get their hands on your backup and all of your production data, it doesn't leave you with many options other than paying the ransom. Having that backup separate would allow you to recover if you have the infrastructure to rebuild onto. And then the final bit is just touching again on the humans. As we know, humans, by our own nature, can be they can make mistakes. And as long as we continue to hire humans in our business, which I'm hoping continues in my lifetime with AI, but certainly it's about investing in the humans. I often call them the human firewall. They are your next line of defense after tech. And given what we're seeing with phishing, social engineering attacks, they are coming through email. They're becoming much harder to spot. And therefore, the risk is ever more increasing from that point of view. The more we do in our technology and the more we lock down our systems, the human part is the only bit that is left behind for the cyber criminal to exploit. You really need to have a culture of no blame. So when a cybersecurity issue happens, so they've clicked on a link, they've put their password in somewhere they shouldn't have, they are telling the right people in your organization as fast as they've done it. And then just running periodic audits. You can do things like an annual penetration test that's going to be checking your infrastructure for vulnerabilities that could be exploited. And then there's all great tools out there to simulate these phishing emails that can push out to your organization and teach them better habits and being able to identify these types of emails. Unfortunately, cyber criminals are using AI and have been for quite some time. So the phishing emails, we remember just a few years ago that had bad grammar in it, misspellings, the easy to spot is gone. It is rare now that we see one like that because they are using AI language models and they're building in slang, they're building in local terminology. And if they are in your system, they can see your email communication. They know your tone, they know how you talk, they know how you engage, making it all much easier to mimic you as an individual within the business and other employees across the organization. So that is our whistle stop review of kind of where supply chain is coming from. To be honest, I could absolutely talk for hours on this topic, but Laura did only give me an hour, and I did want to allow people to be able to ask questions from that. So Laura, I'll pass that back to you. I don't know if there's any questions in there just now.
Let me have a look. We haven't had any questions yet. Anybody got anything they'd like to ask Deborah while she's here? Whether it's linked to
Yeah, it
JLR
doesn't have
or
to be
anything
this,
wider.
anything to do with cyber, not just necessarily GLR. If you've got a burning question you want to ask, then definitely jump in now.
Deborah, I'll have a quick stab at a quick question. As Craig knows, we're doing an SME resilience working group for these kinds of situations. As an SME, what is the next best step to make sure that they are cyber prepared for an incident where an OEM is hit?
I think it is about assessing, taking the time to assess your supply chain. So not all of your suppliers are going to be the same type of supplier. So when it comes to just supply chain, so away from your overall cyber resilience, it is about know where you sit in the supply chain up to the OEM. So know who's in front of you, who's behind you, know who you're reliant on to be able to deliver your services. And remember, this is not just about you being able to manufacture the raw material or the part or the component or even the finished product that ultimately ends up in a car somewhere in the world. Really think about that horizontal as well as your vertical. Think know where you sit in the supply chain, know who you can't live without from that side of it. I don't know there's a huge amount you can really do other than some general reviews with your accountants within your finance team. Have you got the buffer? How long could you go without? I mean, I'm not sure many organizations can withstand not being paid for, for 60, 90 days. If you are, your only customer is someone within the automotive supply chain, ultimately you're feeding up to Nissan, for example. It's difficult to be able to diversify from that point of view. So talk with whoever you sell your part of, who's next in that supply chain. Because if you are working just in time, as a lot of suppliers are, what does that look like if they can't pay you? And start to look at that side of the contract. I think it's fair to say that we all have our role to play from an overall cybersecurity point of view, and it really is. Cyber Essentials is one of the greatest things that, and it's available from a micro right up to a Nissan themselves. And you can get that for not a huge amount of money and still an investment. It's not free. But what that does is it looks at the most common types of cyber attack and make sure you're protected from them. So I think looking at your supply chain and really asking all of the pertinent questions, and then looking overall at your your risk posture. Talk all the time about, think about a row of houses, and if door number one, all the doors and windows are open, all the lights are on, and everybody can see what you've got, and it's really just up for grabs, wondering as you want. And then door number 10, is going to be maybe a big multinational or a bank, for example. So they're going to have bells, whistles, all sorts of security around that. If we think of physical alarms, CCTV, barbed wire, tinted windows, all of those things. You don't need to be number 10 in the street. You just don't want to be number one. So every time you invest in your cybersecurity, you're kind of moving your way up the street. And as you move up the street, then, a lot of cyber criminals still want the easy target, because there is enough sitting in the easy target in door number one. There's enough organizations still in that pot that just moving into door number two could stop that from happening in your organization. And I think the other thing is just, invest time in your humans, because ultimately on a lot of occasions, they're the ones that make the ultimate. Do I click the link? Do I not click the link? Do I download the document? Do I put my password in? I think those are the three areas I would encourage people to be taking a look at.
Yeah, my wife mocked me ceaselessly for clicking a COVID vaccination link. And then she got caught this weekend with a car insurance one. So
Do you know, it is just everywhere, Joe. Anybody that says they haven't clicked a link is telling you an absolute porcupine, to be honest, because it's all day, every day. We have to be lucky every time we open an email. The cyber criminal only needs to be lucky once and get you to click a link. And they're smart with it. They are layering it up so that we will just click without thinking. They're relying on our unconscious bias, really, to go, oh my God, that it needs to be done now. So your urgency is in there. An offer that's too good to be true, especially at this time of year, with, Black Friday that seems to have gone on for I don't know how many weeks at this point, Cyber Monday, then the January sales, all of those things, they're layering it up. So I think honestly, don't be too harsh on yourself. But yeah, I think especially at this time of year, just slow down, I think is probably and trust your gut. If something is wrong, then chances are something is wrong. And no supplier or no customer that sent you an email, if you pick up the phone and go, hey, I've just got this email, it doesn't look right, they'd rather get that phone call than that I've just clicked a link phone call, for sure.
Yeah. No, I've let my wife off, even though she told me a new one when I did it. Thank you.
Deborah, are you seeing cyber essentials become more and more like a mandatory requirement in supply chains from maybe larger organizations specifying?
Yeah, I think we're going to see more of it. I know if you want to do any work with the public sector, national critical infrastructure, there's already a requirement for you to have a certification. So Cyber Essentials or an ISO. I know there are a few different ones that are out there, and it depends who you're working with, to be honest, as to what they're looking for. The government is pushing really, really hard that everybody has Cyber Essentials, and now the push is for Cyber Essentials Plus. When you look at the new Cyber Security Resilience Bill that has come out, they're given powers to fine organizations. So at the moment, if you report a cybersecurity incident, for example, and your data is stolen, it's the ICO that plays around with that. But not every cyber incident data is stolen. And the new cyber resilience bill that it's had its first reading in Parliament, so it is literally hot off the press. And they're doing a staged rollout of it. You can be fined, if I'm remembering correctly, 4% of turnover or £17 million, very similar to the ICO's thresh, and it will go for the parent company. It's not the individual. So while they haven't mandated it, it is mandatory for some sectors already. And I think the more we see these types of attacks, so M&S, JLR, Harrods, the Co-op, the more that these happen, the more there will be pressure on supply chains for what are you doing to protect. Because the M&S one did come through their supply chain. They didn't say who, which is kind of them, but it did come through their supply chain, and it had something to do after the initial attack. It then involved their IT support company as well. So chances are, JLR, it's probably going to, it will ultimately probably come out eventually in the press that it came through there as well. If you look at Arnold Clark, when they were hit a couple of Christmases ago, they were spending 10 million on their IT. They now spend 20, to double their spend. And he, by his own admission, the chief exec, was naive in his own, in his own confession over how he felt about what he was doing. So I do think pressure will be on for supply chain, but I think equally so, I think off this one in particular, I think the cybersecurity resilience bill is going to fight for the smaller people in supply chain, whereas I think focus has always been at the top. And I always get asked, is it helpful when somebody big is hit? And it is and it isn't, because it keeps it in the press, it keeps it, people aware it's still happening. But you often hear, but I'm not M&S and I'm not JLR and I'm not the co-op, why would they want me? And the answer is they don't care, they'll take anything they can get. Or whoever your customer is, they want them. And the way to get that is to find the weak link anywhere and just move up through those chains. So I do think pressure is on, but I think pressure is on who's above you in the supply chain, not just coming after the smaller organizations and pushing hard for them to do something.
Great. Yeah, thank you. That was really useful. If anyone got any more questions, if not, otherwise we'll
if you do have a
share
question and you didn't
recording.
want to ask here, Craig Whiteman, who's on the call, is part of my team here at Net Defence, and he is in your network and attends quite regular. So Laura will be able to pass questions along to him or to me, if you don't want to ask them here today, or if you want to ask questions but want to do it on a more one-to-one basis. I'm sure if you reach out to Craig, we can set something up. We'll send over the slides, Laura, for this, so you've got them, they can go out. And if there's anything else that we can help you with, then please just let us know.
Excellent. Thanks. Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye for now.
Thanks, guys.